Davenport School Community Board of Directors to order. This is Committee of the Whole meeting, and there are quite a few things going on here, but one of the things that I wanted to make a comment on is that we are taping this meeting as well. This is not normal. However, one of the board members asked that we tape this, especially as we have any discussion on boundaries with the interest that the community has in this. It was thought that it would be appropriate to tape that, or to tape this, and that's why this is being taped tonight. So we'll get on with our meeting, and we'll have a showcase. J.B. Young.
Marianne, thank you for coming tonight.
To work hard. In order to stay an avid, we have to carry a binder at all times. Here is my binder. My binder, we have our supplies, which carry pencils, pens, highlighters, erasers, and more. And our planner, which we have to write down our homework and the days. And then I have 5 tabs, which are Avid, Math, Science, Social Studies, and Language Arts. In each tab, you have to have loose paper and C notes. We also have to take corner notes in every class every day. Avid students fill out their planners every day as well. Students are getting anything lower than A have to get their planner signed by the parents. To remain an Avid, we're required to have good attendance, behavior, attitude, and grades. It is our job to be role models for the rest of the 6th graders. Jada is going to tell you how we take notes on our curriculum days.
My name is Jada, and I'm going to talk to you about Cornell Notes. Avid students are required to take C notes in every class. We use them for remembering information. Since we can't possibly remember everything we learn in school, we record them on C notes. Here's an example of one of my C notes for science. As you can see, the essential question answers your notes, and the questions have to do with your notes too also, and you can ask your teacher after class about those notes, or your notes that you've taken in the class answer your questions. The essential question is about your note, the main thing about what you've taken notes on, and the summary answers the essential question. We as Avid students need C notes to keep us organized and to keep what we learned that day fresh in our minds. Deancho is going to tell you about what we do when we are confused about something in our tutorials days.
My name is Deancho. I'm going to talk about the tutorial request form, or the TRF. The TRF is used to help think critically about things you're struggling with. Here's the TRF. First, you have to write a question about what you find confusing, and then write down what you know about it. Then you show an example and the steps that you took to get your answer. While going through this process, you figure out the exact point things start getting confusing. That is your point of confusion. In tutorials, we use our TRF to guide our discussion group. By the end of the tutorials, we are no longer confused. Colleen is going to tell you about what we do in tutorials.
My name is Carlina, and I'm going to tell you about tutorials. In tutorials, we work together to understand our point of confusion questions. We sit in groups of 7 or less and one by one we get in front of the group and ask our questions. Instead of having the group tell us the answer, they ask questions so we are guided to the answer the question ourselves. We take notes. We take notes on 3-column notes like this. By the end of the tutorial, we are able to answer the question we had on things we are confused about. And then we do a reflection and debrief as a class. Latea is going to tell you about our Enrichment Days.
My name is Latea, and I'm going to talk to you about guest speakers. Guest speakers come on Fridays. When they come, we are expected to take C notes. This is a picture of a police officer and veterinarian that visited our class. They talk to us about the things that they did before their career, like schooling and jobs. Then they tell us what inspired them and the obstacles they faced along the way. Having guest speakers help us to think about what kind of career we might want to have. It also helps us to realize we have to work hard in order to be successful in life. Alyssa is going to tell you about our college visits.
My name is Alyssa, and I'm going to talk to you about college visits. College visits are part of our Enrichment Days. When we go on these visits, we tour our campus, sit in classes, and see what college life is like. They tell us about programs they offer and what students need to do in order to succeed. We just went to Augustana and met the basketball coach, toured the library, the music building, the language building, the study hall, and visited their museum. These are pictures from our trip. Our college visits not only help us learn a lot, but they are also a lot of fun, so it's a win-win situation.
Okay. Included in your packets is the PowerPoint that we just did, an example of C notes, an example of the tutorial request forms, and then I had the students give testimonials on how Avid has helped them. We also gave a little bit of information about the student selection process, students' responsibilities, curriculum basics, the 10-step tutorial process, and enrichment events. And these students would be happy to answer any questions that you have, so you are welcome to ask any of them anything from you've heard from today.
Excuse me. My gosh, this is a little bit different because normally we only have showcases on our regular meeting dates. However, we've been setting aside a few because we've been engaged in a lot of conversation on boundaries and budget. And so this being probably the first time that we've had a showcase during a committee of the whole, as far as I can recollect. I'll say a few words afterwards, but are there any comments or questions by the board? Pat?
Yeah, I would ask if one or both, a couple of you would tell me how you feel that the AVID program is different from the other programs in the school and how it's helping you. Go ahead.
I think Avid is better because they let us take notes, and when we take notes, we're like learning because we have to do a summary about it and just learn more.
The Avid program helps us more because it's more challenging for us and it's advanced. It's more advanced than other programs that we have in school. So it challenges you to work harder and it helps you to achieve the goals that you set for yourself.
And it's my understanding that to get in that program, you had to prove that you were a good worker. Mm-hmm. And so all of you proved that you were determined to succeed, and I congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
Bill?
Yeah, I just want to congratulate all of you. You're a very impressive group of kids. You really are. How do your parents get involved in this program? What's their role?
Well, for whenever we go on visits, they can come and chaperone.
And do they help at home?
My mom is taking me around to look at colleges, just like in the Avid program where we go around and visit colleges to see where I want to go.
Very cool.
They're also supposed to be involved when we're doing our homework and everything to help us and lead us to do harder.
You guys are great representatives of your school. Congratulations.
Ken?
Just like said, I'm really proud to listen to young people and what you're doing, going out in And Director Zamora mentioned one of the criteria, that you had to be a hard worker. Just a couple of you quickly. Why do you think you were selected for this?
I like to write a lot, and that's one of the ways that I'm a very visual person, so it's one of the ways that I see and learn things, which probably helps me compared to maybe an auditory or kinesthetic person.
Are you a college professor?
Anyone else?
I like to read in my free time, and I have good grades so far.
Well, yes.
I'm a very advanced writer, and when I write, I overwrite. So if we have an assignment and we only supposed to write a minimum, I usually go overboard with that. So.
Great. Congratulations to all of you and to your staff.
Anybody else? Director Klool.
First, I have a question because I'm interested in what's going on at school, and I noticed that the title of this PowerPoint was called JBK8 ABD, which is pretty catchy. But what do you guys call your school now? Because I think JBK8 is such a cool name since you're now a K through 8 school. Is that what kids call it, or is it still JB? Still JB. Okay. I'm hoping it turns into kids start calling it JBK8 because I think it's pretty cool. Impressive presentation. Thanks a lot. What I'm wondering is, anytime you start a new program like this, you know, it's kind of hard. You have to get used to it. You have to figure out what you have to do, when you have to do it. Have you gotten to the point now where it's pretty natural for you to be able to do this, or do you have to like look at your notes and say, well, I have to do this now or I have to do that? Is it natural? Okay. And the follow-up question to that is that sometimes we start new programs and they continue to be a chore because we really don't see why we have to do it. Question for you is this program making sense for you? Does it help you study better? Very clearly so. Great.
Especially in tutorials, because everybody works on helping us to understand what we're confused about.
Biggest question.
So the tutorial section is probably one of the most important.
And C notes. We have to take notes and we have to do the summary to get a grade on them.
So, have a really big background on when we have tests and stuff, because as we're being organized, we can find things easily. And all the notes that we take in our class, they help us a lot more on our tests.
Excellent. This is going to put you in a good condition for going to high school because you will be ready. Thanks a lot, guys.
Anything else? Director DeFau.
And actually, Director Klool gave me a nice segue because I was going to ask if being part of this program has changed what you think about your future and about your opportunities for the future.
Has helped me figure out what college I want to go to and what I want to be and how hard I have to work to get there and to live up to my goals.
Thanks.
Director Zamora.
Another question. Are any of you thinking of becoming teachers? Coming back here and teaching?
All right. Anything else from the board? Oh, sure. Director Sherwood.
The federal cuts, is that going to impact your ability to maintain this program next year?
And, we will have the funding to continue the program in year 2. It's a tiered program, so the first year was the most expense in some training in that, and then next year we will expand. So these students will be 7th graders. It currently serves 25 6th graders. They will move to 7th grade, and we'll start another group in 6th grade. So we'll have 2 groups, about 50 students, but the staff has all been trained for that, so the cost will just be a membership fee and some incidentals like the tutorials and that, but we are able to budget for that to continue the program. And I don't think they mentioned, but the goal of the program, and they said it, is to be in advanced classes, and then when they go to high school, AP classes. So this program gets them ready for honors classes and AP. That's the expectation.
Then they might be interested in something that we're working on, and that is being able to finish an entire associate's degree while you're still in high school. So you have to pay attention and watch how that gets set up.
And I'm confident they'd have the skills to do that if that was an opportunity for them.
Okay, if there's nothing else from the board, I wanted to say thank you very much. Mary Ann, I didn't catch your name.
Jessica Bishop.
It is Jessica.
And if any of you have any questions, feel free to email or call me, and we really appreciate the opportunity to talk here.
So thank you very much for this showcase, and to all of you, you did just an amazing job up here. You really did. And every single one of you was fantastic. You really were. So thank you very much to all of you, okay?
Could the parents and staff, the staff of the school and parents that are here, would you stand up, be recognized? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the early childhood education structure and budget.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have some challenges in our special education and Title I budgets that will impact early childhood. We've been working for a considerable amount of time trying to look at options, and Patty Pace-Tracy and Kathy Schulte are here tonight to make a presentation.
I can too. Well, that's a tough act to follow, let me tell you, when we're here for a not so exciting conversation. Thanks for having us tonight. Kathy and I and Dr. Tate had mentioned a number of us have been working very hard, and we've spent a lot of hours talking about early childhood, and we've been having some very difficult conversations about looking at things a little bit differently. Ralph, you had mentioned that the majority of your time with the board has been focused on looking at boundaries and budgets and so forth, and unfortunately those aren't always fun conversations to have, and we've found that with early childhood they've been really challenging conversations for us to have regarding what do we need to look at differently with our programming and the options that we have available for us because of funding and where we're at with our respective budgets. So tonight we're going to give you a short presentation and have a lot of dialogue with you regarding what we're actually looking at and what we're faced with not only the special education budget but also the title dollars that have been allocated to support the early childhood programs historically. And you know, it's a difficult, it's not fun to be up here. It's difficult because we've never had to come up here really and talk about this. I know in the 3 years I've been here, and so this is hard for us to be up here, and so but unfortunately it's our reality. So we have a proposal to share with you and talk through a lot of numbers and why we're making decisions and presenting you with the proposal that we have on the table tonight. So given that, we will get started. And I want to apologize up front for the fact that Kendall Owa, our Director of Federal Programs, was not able to be with us tonight. So I'll spend just a little bit of time kind of just briefly sharing the information from her slide regarding title funding. So why are we looking at the potential reductions to the early childhood programs? We are currently, and I believe you're aware of this, and we're presented at the February board meeting with the projected special education deficit, and I want to spend a little bit of time talking about why that's where it's at and so forth. But because of where we're at with the special education deficit, we are looking right now at a proposed reduction to the villages of almost $675,000. What would that look like? That would be in position reductions, not necessarily, and I want to emphasize this, not necessarily people, but positions. For instance, if we have any open vacancies, we wouldn't be filling those if people have transferred into different positions. So right now we're looking at 3 teaching positions and 6 paraprofessional positions that would be reduced at the villages. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about because, you know, I'm never a believer that you just simply focus on one particular program and say that's the program that's going to take the hit. I mean, that's just simply not equitable. So we've been spending a lot of time, and I also want to remark that Teresa Westling, our budget specialist, who does an outstanding job with our special ed budget, is here tonight, along with Natalie, help me with Natalie.
Amhoff.
Thank you, Natalie Amhoff, who is our early childhood budget specialist, as well as here. In the event you ask a question about the budget that Kathy or I are unable to answer, we brought them along as backup because they're our number crunchers, so they can help us with that. But in looking at our projected deficit for special education this year, we have already taken a comprehensive look, K-12, at what we need to do to reduce that. And there are a number of issues that come into play regarding the special education deficit, and I believe I'll be coming back in a couple of months and talk more specifically about that. The unpredictability of special education is that we're required, no matter what, to provide programming for every student who is on an individualized education plan. And sometimes that can be incredibly expensive, and we have a lot of unpredictable costs that do come up. But, you know, we take all of those things into consideration and ensure that we're providing a free and appropriate public education to those kids. And sometimes it costs us more than we would anticipate in our budget. So for this year, we've had some of those expenses for individual programming for students that have gotten very costly for us, but we've had to do that. In addition to that, we've had to look at some specific contracted services to support us with some of our very challenging behaviors. And when it gets to that level, it means that these kids are becoming more than what our teaching staff and our building staff are able to sustain in the building. And so we have to look at other options that we can put into place to support those kids. So those have hit us this year, which is an unusual situation for us. We haven't had that since I've been here, but those issues have come up this year. In addition to that, last year we were looking at making some significant reductions in para positions within our special education budget. Specifically, we were looking at approximately 30 positions that we were going to reduce. And after lengthy discussions with the first year of the Resource Allocation Committee and conversations that had occurred, we elected not to make those cuts, knowing that it would potentially have an impact on this year's budget. Those were bigger conversations than just me coming and saying, let's not do that. They were involved many more people than that. So we did not make those cuts. That would have been approximately $600 and some thousand at that time. We also, which this piece is what we want, we had fewer students entitled for special education at the start of this year, which means our budget was less. So we started out this year's budget with approximately $500,000 less because of the fact that we had fewer students entitled for special education, and we will experience that again this coming year, which is the direction we want to go, because we want fewer students receiving IEP services because they're doing better in general education. So we're going to see that again. In addition to those things, and this one, I like to pound my fist on the table and say this just isn't fair, but it doesn't get me anywhere when I do that. We found out about 2 weeks ago, we have to send in our special education supplement every September, and Teresa Westling, our finance specialist, does an incredible job with that, and she spends hours on ensuring that that's correct. The Department of Ed contacted us and indicated that on their end, they had a glitch in their software system, and so 2 journal entries that should have been made were not made on our budget, which resulted, we carried over this year a $360,000 positive balance to start our budget. Unfortunately, with them finding 2 critical errors on their end, it resulted in almost $300,000. And so now they're saying that our budget is now going to have to be reduced that additional $300,000. So even though I like to say that's not fair, it doesn't get me anywhere, because that particular journal entry is what the Department of Ed said it needed to be. So in actuality, we thought we carried over $360,000. We only carried over $60,000, but we just found that out a couple of weeks ago. So those are the circumstances surrounding why we are experiencing a deficit. But knowing that and predicting that it was coming, we started already looking at what do we need to do to reduce our budget, because again, we're required to provide special education services for every student, and we have to ensure that we do that. But are there areas that we can start to cut to try to balance this out? And so we've started making those recommendations already. We've already looked at our staffing for next year, and we've already made approximately 10 reductions to our teaching staff, because we know we're going to have fewer students again receiving services. The 30 paras that I'd mentioned before, we've gone through and looked at our paraprofessional staffing K-12 and along with pre-K, and we want to recommend an additional 16 positions in addition to the 30 that we need to take care of from last year. We cut this year already our teacher discretionary funds, so that those are less. We give an allowance to our teachers for reinforcements in the classrooms, things such as that. So we've already cut that, and we'll look at that again for next year. And we have contracted services that we've had in place for a number of years, even prior to myself, in which we utilize folks who come in and help us with our very challenging students who have the greatest needs, and we've looked at reducing those for this year, and we'll look at reducing those again for next year, which can sometimes be a double-edged sword when some of these students present us with challenges that become incredible for us to try to figure out. So that's what I'm a little nervous about, but we know we need to be fiscally responsible as well. And we keep ensuring that we are attempting to run our budget as close to what our needs truly are and not exceed or be frivolous in spending of our dollars. And so that is what we're doing to address our deficit, and we're looking at it again from a pre-K-12 perspective. So when we look at why are we making changes all of a sudden here at the villages, why are they coming into the mix when traditionally they haven't been part of that? Again, having to look at the picture from a complete circle, we have to explore and look at every area of programming that we provide within special education. And so if we see some potential overages in the early childhood special education services, then we're compelled to say we need to look at some reductions there. And what we've predicted in the past for what we anticipate we'll use for special ed services at the early childhood level have not been at that same level that we've actually needed. So when we talk about our number, the total number of students or the percent of programming costs we need, they're a little bit different. And so we are making those reductions to early childhood accordingly, or proposing those. So that's kind of why. And the how we're looking at addressing the deficit and why we're looking at it from a special ed early childhood perspective. Now I want to add, the second bullet on this slide actually addresses the title funds, and unfortunately Kendall couldn't be here, and I said I would just share this since I was talking about it, but Kendall Owa with federal programs is recommending a $455,900 cut for title spending at the villages, simply because of what is coming down from the sequestering of federal dollars and different things there. And again, she also that budget does sustain and provide services pre-K-12. And so in looking at the total picture on why do we need to now look at some potential cuts to the village programs, that would be the why of that. And looking at a substantial amount that'll be sequestered next year from the federal government.
Okay, we're going to do a comparison here today of what our current model is and what the proposed model is. So we'll just kind of follow the lines across horizontally here. Our current model is we have a year-round program. Our students do go year-round with the exception of we have a holiday break and a spring break. The proposed model will be a school year program that will follow the traditional school year calendar. The current program, our teachers are on a 215-day contract. The proposed model will be a 185-day contract. Our current model, our paraprofessionals are currently on a 230-day contract, and the proposed model, our paraprofessionals will be on a 187-day contract. In our current model, we have 6 birth to 2-year-old classrooms. In the proposed model, those classrooms will be eliminated. In our current model, there are 24 multi-age classrooms. In the proposed model, there will be 21 multi-age classrooms. In our current model, we do have the Fast Forward computer program. That program will be eliminated in the proposed model.
And you know, one thing I want to say is I want to really thank Kathy for all of the hard work that she put into place in coming up with this, because as you can see, it's not easy to ever do that. But she really spent a lot of time in this, and you know, one of the conversations that we've had repeatedly is about ensuring the ongoing quality of our programming. And we both agree that that is not something we're willing to sacrifice at all in our village programs, even with proposed changes that we're looking at here. So.
Staffing changes. This will be a reduction of 3 special education teacher positions. But please keep in mind the model would look different. So it would actually be an addition of 2 special education teacher positions, so it will even out. We will not see any teachers that would be cut in that capacity.
That's correct.
It will be a reduction of 6 special education para positions. And then with all of the proposed changes, it will be a net reduction of 23 paras. It will be a reduction of 1 clerical position, a reduction of 1.5 nurse. It'll be a reduction of 1 office para, and a reduction of 1 teacher librarian. We do feel it's very important for the continuation of services for all of our families. They do need that continuum of quality care, that there would need to be a summer enrichment program available to our families. This program would be open at Children's Village West and Children's Village Hoover, but all families would have the opportunity to attend. This would be where we would open 10 multi-age classrooms with 16 children. AM wrap services would remain the same, and the YMCA would still come in at the 2 to 5:30 to offer that after-school piece. So it would still be offering that service from 7 to 5:30 daily in the summer to the families. How it will look different is we will have 5 teachers that we will put on, if they choose to participate, they will be on temp at wills. These 5 teachers will work 5 hours a day. They'll be responsible for 2 classrooms. They'll be in one classroom for 2 hours and in the other classroom for 2 hours, and then have an hour for planning and an hour to pull together all of their anecdotal notes onto the GOLDS assessment system that we are required to use by the state. This will also include 22 paras that will be on a temp at will. It will be the same hours, 6.25 hours a day. We anticipate the program will be approximately 52 days every summer. So it will cover the remainder of May, June, July, and then before school starts again in August. Students who utilize this program will be charged tuition on a sliding scale based on a free and reduced lunch status. The only exception would be the Head Start students who will be paid through our Head Start contract to attend. The current versus proposed model cost. Current cost, if we would continue with the year-round calendar and no cuts, would be $6.7 million. The proposed model cost, which is a school year calendar and cuts, would be 5.5. So you can see it's a total reduction of almost 1.2 million.
So, on that note, we would like to open it up to any questions that you may have.
I'm sure we'll have a few. Are there any questions? Director Sherwood.
I get it. This is not exactly great news. Are there any services available for 0 to 2 in the area besides what we provide?
Can't hear.
Sorry. Are there any other services in the area for 0 to 2 besides what we provide?
Are you talking about utilized through Davenport Community School District?
Well, no, that the
In the
parents would
community?
have access to.
In the community?
Besides what we do.
I do know that some of our partner sites that we utilize through statewide voluntary 4-year-old preschool programming do offer 0 to 2 programming. Head Start offers early Head Start programming. I don't have the current numbers as to what the number of slots are available in the community.
And how many kids have you been providing services to in 0 to 2?
60.
60. And your elimination of Fast Forward, that's a phonemic development program, as I recall, fairly highly touted. Have you seen any success with that program? What are you going to replace it with?
We will not be replacing it with any programs at this time. Right now, we utilize it with all of our 4-year-old students. 4-year-old students, all of the teachers and the Fast Forward coaches work together, and they place students where they take their beginning scores on the Brigands, the PALS, and there's a rubric to determine what children would be eligible for that program. With the new proposed program, there would be no replacement.
I would like to respond to that, though. It's a computer-based program, and I'm sure you're familiar with it and so forth, but the one thing I would like to say is that there's nothing that replaces direct instruction from teachers, and so I know that we would ensure that those kids would still receive those early literacy skills that they need. I mean, that would not be sacrificed. That's a high priority for our programming, and so that would not be sacrificed.
That development's going to be there. And the cut on the nursing position, that's kind of a critical thing, especially in this age group. As you're probably aware, some of these things develop, these reading issues and develop out of excessive ear infections and things like that. How are we going to ensure these kids get the kind of nursing services that they need?
In the proposed model, we would have one full-time nurse that would be shared between Children's Village West and Children's Village Hoover. There would also be an addition of a health para. So if the nurse was not at West, the health para would be at Hoover and vice versa. So it would be sort of a shared agreement.
And I understand that you increased in special ed, your specialist positions increased by 10 contact days. Is that right? Contract days?
They have been increased for professional development days and so forth. That is correct.
10. And what did that cost us to make that increase?
Well, that's a good question. I'm looking to Teresa. I'm not sure where she went. I don't know if she can pull that. She's back there. She'll try to pull that. I'd hate to give you just a shot in the dark here.
We're wanting to know the per diem for, this is our specialist package. And we have 5 of them that are doing it. And they're doing how many days?
10 extra days.
Okay. I'm going to guess off the top of my, totally off the top of my head without a calculator at all, that you're going to be somewhere around 30,000 maybe by the time you pay for them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Additional discussion? Director Crumwoody?
Thank you. Like Director Sherwood, yeah, after that great presentation from J.B. Young, and then we're hit with this, it's like, wow. I want to talk about the birth to year programming first of all. And I think you, Patty, mentioned there were 60.
Kathy did.
Kathy, you mentioned there were 60. Out of that 60 number, how many of those students are special education? Do you know right off?
We do have some of our students in those classrooms that are also on IFSPs, which is a family service plan that is serviced through birth to 2 through the AEA. I believe in one classroom, it's a quarter of the students. It varies. In some classrooms you may have one, some classrooms you may have 2 and 3. It depends on the students that are enrolled in the program at that time.
Okay. So in response to Director Sherwood's question about those children receiving services, it is a federal mandate, as I understand it, that those birth to 2 children who are identified as special education would receive some services.
I'd like to clarify that because that's a great point that you're making. The birth to 2 services are a required responsibility of the AEA.
Right.
So that is their program. Those kids are in our programs, but the services regarding the IFSP, the Individualized Family Service Plan, are actually the responsibility of the AEA. The district does not bear the responsibility. We don't get any dollars to support those kids in the capacity of special education funding or anything like that. They say birth to 3 services are provided by the AEA. So those folks would be responsible for those services.
Have there been any discussions with the AEA as for possible other types of services? Do you feel we're getting adequate services from the AEA for our early childhood programs?
Do we think we are getting adequate services for those? They do, with the IFSP piece, I'm going to have Kathy respond to that. Because again, that would be their responsibility for those birth through 3 kids. They provide services in regard to identification of students through the evaluation clinic and so forth, of any Davenport students who go through that. So they do provide those services for the identification and evaluation of students who are potential special education students. So they provide that service. They also do provide consultation services to our Children's Village programs to support those kids and to support the teachers and so forth.
Okay. Patty, when you were talking about contracted services, were you talking contracted services beyond the early childhood programs? Or
Yes.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked me to clarify that because I'm talking pre-K-12 contracted services, which is part of what led to our overall special ed deficit and why we're now looking at the villages. So that would be for our overall programming.
Okay, because that kind of confused me along
I
with
apologize.
the 10 reduction of teaching staff. You're talking
That's K-12 as well.
K-12,
Mm-hmm.
not with
right.
in the. And then Kathy, you talked about even with the reductions. I can't remember your exact words, but we'd still have the same amount of service. Is that? I'm not exactly how you stated that, but
I did talk about the teachers.
Right.
That piece.
Yes.
And the special education program would look different within the villages. And because of the different model, there would be 2 additional teachers that would be hired. So there were 3 cuts for teachers, but there would be 5 teachers needed to maintain the model that is being proposed.
Okay. Some of the funding for the preschools comes from state grants, and I forget the name of them. Help me.
We have a Shared Visions grant.
Shared Visions, okay.
And of course we have our 4-year-old voluntary preschool program dollars.
Okay.
We have our Head Start dollars, tuition, good old-fashioned tuition.
Okay.
We have some dollars that we received from a DHS wraparound grant that helps to cover that before and after school expense. It covers most of the before school expense, and then after school it offsets some of the fees that families pay, which is a contracted services through the YMCA.
Okay. With the Shared Visions grant, has there been any discussion with the Department of Education as far as increasing those dollars?
I wish there was. I think that's a bigger conversation with our legislators.
Okay. So that's something we, as board members and the public, need to do, is to talk to our state about Shared Visions money.
Correct.
Because it's my understanding that these Shared Visions grants have gone on for years.
Absolutely.
Once you get a Shared Visions grant, the money doesn't increase, or very seldom doesn't increase. So we need to really emphasize that, because if we are mandated to serve early childhood and have early childhood programs in the state, we need to be talking to them about more Shared Visions money. Which brings me to Shared Visions grants in the other schools outside of the villages, because we do have preschools outside of the village. Are there going to be any reductions, like at Hoover or I don't know where else, Truman, Hayes?
Buchanan, I think.
What did I say, Hoover? I meant Hayes.
Yeah, Hayes.
Hayes.
With our 4 villages, we have Children's Village West, Hayes, Buchanan, and Hoover. All of those sites do receive some Shared Visions dollars, along with statewide voluntary preschool, title dollars, Head Start. We would see a reduction in classrooms at Children's Village Hayes. Our 4-year-old program at Truman would remain the same. We also offer 2-hour 4-year-old programs at Buffalo. That will remain the same. The 2-hour programs we offer at Children's Village West, Children's Village Hoover, and we also have 2-hour programs at Buchanan. Those will still be intact.
Okay. My last question, I don't mean to dominate this conversation, but tuition. For many years in this district, tuition was quite low. I'm not sure where it's at now, but has there been discussion about raising tuition to help pay for some of these expenses?
Last year, we did not raise the tuition per se, but we made the families responsible for meals, because meals used to be included in that tuition. So the families did receive a significant hike, because they were then responsible for the meals. We do try to keep current with other programs within the city, and we could do some further fact-finding to see where we fall again with everybody else, to see if that would be a viable choice.
Okay. Thanks.
Additional discussion? Director DeFault.
You mentioned the reduction based upon the sequestration and the impact on the Children's Village programming. Have we done any assessment as to what that sequestration may do to our K-12 special ed programming?
For special education sequestered dollars, we're going to be looking at approximately a $50,000 cut out of our Part B dollars next year as well. And so we have to kind of look at that as pre-K-12 and how are we going to put that into the budget. So that is why we are looking at, when you hear that we're looking at a reduction of 46 para positions, that's a chunk, but we're trying to ensure that we not only cover the fact that our budget will be less to start anyway next year, because we'll have fewer students on our special ed weighted count, so we have to be prepared for that. But we also have to look at what are the projections of the needs of the kids that we have. And so we are figuring that in. Title has a different sequestered dollar amount, and I apologize, I'm not able to speak to what that is and what impact that will have on the title dollars next year. I didn't even think to ask that in preparation for this. So that would be a question we would have to ask someone else regarding what those total dollars will be for title. But I know our title dollars go pre-K-12 as well. And so we have to take into every account, because unfortunately with our special ed budget, and this is the frustrating part for Teresa, who does actually submit our special education supplement every year, which is in September. We swing from day to day when she's crunching those numbers, or from month to month when you get our special ed budget update. We could be positive one day, and then the next day we could be at a negative $700,000 balance, and the next day when the state starts inputting their data, we could be back at a $400,000 positive balance. So for us, we have to predict as much as we can, but when the state has to go in and do their journal entries to our special ed supplemental budget, they have to figure in how many foster care claim students do we have, how many high-cost students do we have. So we literally don't really have an actual understanding of where that deficit's going to fall until the last minute, when it ends up really getting certified by the state. We certify it, but then it can change from when they certify it. So it's a little unpredictable for us, and so we have to do our best guesstimates that we can and plan for the fact that we don't want to start out with a deficit. We want to start out on the positive side. Does that answer your question?
Sure. In regard to the reference to 46 para positions that will be cut this upcoming year and the 23 para net reduction at the children's villages, does that 46 incorporate those 23, or are we really looking at a total of in excess of 60?
I'll let Kathy speak to the 23 of, and I don't know if she included the 6 special education pairs within that 23. You're shaking your head, yes. But the majority of the 46 that I was referring to are special education.
Okay, but it's not 46 plus 23.
It's 46 plus, you included the 6, so it'd be plus 17. Mm-hmm. Because she's recommending an additional 17 para reduction from the villages. Am I correct in that, Kathy?
Correct.
Okay.
So a total reduction of 65 paras in the upcoming year.
Positions.
PK-12.
PK-12.
Okay. 65 is what I heard as total number. And then again, in regard to the 10 teaching positions, is that 10 K-12 or PK-12? Do the 3 reductions referenced?
That's a good question as well. The 10 are K-12. So we went through and looked at staffing for next year, and those are over our K-12 staff.
Okay, so
and then there would be 3 additional positions at the Children's Village. So that'd be a total of 13. And how we actually looked at those reductions, we had positions that were open that we did not fill.
Okay.
The 3 that I'm referring to.
But we do not expect to gain a net reduction of 65 paras or 13 special ed teachers via attrition.
You know, it's every year that's also unpredictable, because when we start each school year, we always have special ed open positions. And so it's really hard to predict how many that will be until we kind of see where things are over the course of the summer, because we do have a lot of movement in our para positions over the summer. And so we never really can predict what the net is going to end up being until we're ready to start school. But I'll be starting my 4th year, and every year we've had open para vacancies in special education. And, you know, I can't speak to, is that just a result of their unappealing positions and people don't want to apply for those positions, or we're just that short? But we have historically, since I've been here, had open positions that we've had to start the year with, that we're trying to get filled with folks.
Director Zamora.
Is this the worst case scenario that you've given to us, or is it possibly going to get worse?
For special education, with the cuts that we're making, we are not anticipating any more cuts. We believe that we've done everything pre-K-12 that we need to ensure that we're covered. Knowing, again, with special education, I could turn around at the start of the year based on our student population and need to add staff, depending on how many students we have, how many move in. It all depends. So we can predict, and that's what we do. We predict that these are the cuts we need to make, knowing that we may end up having to add teaching positions back in. We do that every year with our K-12 staff, just because it's the nature of the beast.
Well, if the legislature should come through and remove the sequester or the cuts or whatever you want to call it, would we be able then to fill out the program again somewhere to its current level?
I can't speak for the title piece of it because I'm not quite sure what all of that looks like. And I know that that would be a big part of the overall programming that Kathy's referring to. For the special education piece, the dollar amount that we're looking at to be sequestered is $50,000. I'm not going to say only $50,000, but for where we're at with our current deficit, I would have to answer no.
And are you telling me then that, I think what I'm hearing you say is that there's a possibility that there'll be no actual laying off of teachers and possibly not even many paras?
That's what we're hoping for. But again, until we really know how all of those positions fall out over the summer, we're not able to predict will there actually be people that lose those positions.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Director Sherwood?
Yeah, one thing you said, you talked about a balanced approach to this when you're doing the cuts, doing a K-12 or pre-K 12. I guess my sense is that that may not be the best in the best interest of the district to do it that way. These early childhood positions, as far as I'm concerned, are gold. I mean, that's where we get the best bang for our buck. That means that we have to, skeletalize some of the upper grades in some of these services. I know we're limited by legal issues, but to transfer that to these positions to maintain the strength here, that 0 to 2 thing to me is we fight for years. I mean, my adult lifetime. Achieve these kinds of things, I think we're probably one of the leaders in the state on this thing. Regressing from that, backing away from that, I don't know when we're going to come back. And if there's a way to imbalance this pre-K 12 budget so that we maintain as strong a position in early education that we can, I would encourage you to do that.
Additional discussion, Director Kluhl.
Find myself reflecting on the JBK8 AVID presentation and wondering if we could just apply AVID, if it might be a better result. I understand sequestration and the fact that our title funds are going to be cut, and I think we and probably Rock Island Arsenal locally are at the head of that in terms of feeling the impacts, and we're all going to have to realize those reductions in funds. But the state funding, none of what you're projecting here is based on the fact that we're programming 0% allowable growth. Are we talking general funds here at all?
What I'm talking about are supplemental dollars, and I believe what Kathy's referring to are all supplemental dollars as well. Is that correct, Kathy?
Correct.
So nothing that we're talking about here in terms of these the 673,000 are pending, whether or not allowable growth is 0, 2, or 4. Okay. In terms of the board dealing with legislators, Kathy, I was troubled with your cadence in presentation of the current model and proposed models, and I can sense the pain that you went through in making some of these decisions. But in terms of needing to know information on the board, can you tell us the difference between having a year-round program and a school year program with our pre-K programs?
I do think that the year-round program is important for that continuation of services, which is why we built the summer enrichment piece in. Our families do need that service in order for them to be successful, and again, our children, it gives them that opportunity for those months for further growth and development. Our curriculum in the summer is usually more the project approach. We utilize the students' interest in driving, and a lot of enrichment type activities are occurring. I do think it's an important piece, one that we wouldn't want to lose completely, which again is why the summer enrichment piece was built in.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to be relying on our partners to a great deal to help us out in terms of having that year-round opportunity for the kids.
When you think of brain development, 90% of a child's brain is developed by the age of 5. That's another reason why that's so important, to make sure those continuum of services are available.
Mm-hmm. Agree. The most troubling aspect, I think, of the current model versus the proposed model is the birth through 2-year-old classrooms. Something that we built up, and 60 kids who are going to be looking for services. And what concerns me is that our centers, our early childhood centers, are disappearing too because of financial reasons. So it's going to be even more of a struggle to find a place for these children to go to. And as you said, it's so important. Mm-hmm. This is distressing. We all know. I mean, there are a lot of things that we don't know, but we do know that the importance of early childhood, when kids' minds are hardwiring, is so important in order for them to be able to ever catch the brass ring of the ability to seek their constitutional rights. happiness. So this is I know it was a hard thing for you to present. It's hard for the board to try to capture and deal with. It's hardest on our preschool children, and I think it's up to us as the board and the community to continue to make sure that our legislature understands the impact, because sometimes I think they lose sight of the real impact that's happening with our youngest and most vulnerable citizens.
I agree.
Additional discussion. Director Crumwoody.
With your proposed reductions, will this have any impact on your accreditation for NACE? Do you know right off?
We will work diligently to ensure that it is not affected. It will be a collective effort amongst all of us to make sure that we do maintain that piece. NACE accreditation is necessary for the shared visions dollars, and it is one of the quality program standards that we do have to meet for statewide voluntary preschool program dollars and for our special education dollars that we receive.
Okay.
And I would just like to add, you know, regarding special education services, no matter what, our students are going to receive their special education services, and they're going to be what they need. We don't have options to not do that. And so I want to be clear that even at the early childhood level, that the kids, for what their needs are, will receive their special education needs. So.
Just to follow up with Director Sherwood, I too would emphasize that I hope we take really a serious look across the entire special education realm, and
absolutely,
because I too agree that early childhood, if we don't get these kiddos off to a good start, we're going to have a lot more issues as kids get older and so forth. But
And you're absolutely right. One of the things, though, that we always find, and we're actually finding it with our early childhood special education programming as well, is that the state limits us on how we can spend our dollars. And so some of the past practices that we've had in place for how we've projected how are we going to fund our students at the early childhood level are no longer viable options for us according to the state. Whereas we used to look at projected number of seats or how many slots will we need, and then we pay for those up front. We're being told we're no longer able to do those things. So we have to come in line with what we can do financially according to the rules that the state sets for us and how we can spend those dollars as well. So that's one of the things that we're looking at as we look at how we're providing those services.
Anything else? Director Sherwood.
Just a question, so I'm clear on this. Non-special ed title money, though, can be flexed across the district.
Yeah.
And my point is that I understand you have limitations based on regs and law, but where we have freedom, I think that if we're triaging, this has to take a top priority, period. We know this from 100 years of research. We spend the money here now at $1, or we spend $10 later on trying to correct what we don't do now. So it's just not right to.
Thank you. Anything else? Superintendent Tate.
After boundaries, this was my least favorite thing to deal with. And when they brought the issue to me several months ago, I anticipated what the board would say, and we had a group that diligently worked to look at every possible angle of this. And, you know, to Kathy's benefit, she didn't just start looking at ways to cut. She fought and fought and fought, and finally I said we at least need to have something to take to the board so you could look at. We can't begin to balance early childhood special education against intermediate special education, high school special education. If they need it, they need it. We have a process. They need it, they need it. So I need to be careful. Don't ask me to do that. I can't do that. The board has some options. We're talking about $1.83 million, $1.183 million. You want to take that from somewhere else, you can think about that. That's why we gave you the bottom line. If we don't get this, then the only option we know of is what we've proposed here.
Anything else, Director Zamora?
Yes, I want to speak to all the people in the audience. The most effective thing that you can do is to call your legislators, call your senators, blast them with emails, tell them what we need. I have found that if they can, they listen. So if you want to make a difference personally, that's one way you can do it.
Thank you. Anything else? I've got a couple of comments, questions. One of the things, if I did my math right, it looks like you're talking about in percentage a reduction of 17.6%. Is that correct? If I take the 1.183 over the 6719.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay, and if I kind of followed the thread, the contribution of the decrease due to sequestration is only $50,000. Is that $50,000 per year?
For the special education?
Well, for the sequestration portion of that decrease, I want to know is in terms of a percentage. How could you characterize the sequestration issue as a percentage of this total?
As a total of the 673,000?
As a total of the total reduction of 1.18 million. You're talking about total reductions of 1.183 million. I want to know what portion of that as a percentage is due, or dollars, total dollars is due to sequestration.
Well, I'm not sure how much the dollar amount is for the title sequestration and what that is, so it'll be hard to figure that out. I know for next year that we're being told that Part B, which is special education, will be $50,000. I don't have the total amount. I'm not sure what the total amount is for title and what that sequestered amount will be, to add it all in to figure out what the total percent would be at that point.
And the $50,000 would be at least for 10 years, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. I wanted to go back to something that you talked about, Patty, and it's something that I've been concerned about. When you make a recommendation that a student receives services, and sometimes those recommendations they come to the board in terms of a contract, that this is something that we need to do. And some of those are large dollar amounts. And I'm curious how you vet those. I mean, how do you determine, because some of those are so big, and some of them I anticipate go beyond what the board might be able to be compensated, or not the board, the district might be able to be compensated for.
Okay.
How do you make that decision? How do you vet those services?
Sure, that's a great question. Some of the contracts that come before you are for students that are receiving services in out-of-state facilities, and unfortunately, when those decisions are made, they're not made by the district or the IEP team. For students who are served in out-of-state facilities, those are made either by court-placed decisions or by DHS. And so how that ends up is that we're contacted and we're informed that a student's being placed in an out-of-state facility, and then we're obligated and responsible for whatever the educational costs are attached to that facility. And so there's not a discussion with us regarding what that's going to cost or where that student's going to be placed. The placement's been made, and then we're obligated, according to the Department of Ed, we have to complete paperwork that goes to the state. It's many cases it's after the fact, where we have to complete the paperwork that says the student's being placed in an out-of-state facility. We don't make those decisions locally. Those are made by DHS or they're made through the court. IEP teams too have the purview to make those decisions, but I can tell you we've not made those decisions. And so those are simply placements that are made by those two entities, and then we get contacted that a student's going to be placed, and then we are informed that we will be responsible for those educational educational costs that are incurred in that placement. And then you end up, as the board, seeing the results of a contract that then has to come to you to be signed because the out-of-state facility sends us a contract saying that you need to sign this so that we can provide these services.
Okay, and so
that'd be one.
All right, and I appreciate that, and then, however we're compensated, that's just the way it is, and we don't have much to say about it.
We don't. We do try in some of those cases. We will try to make that student, we'll flag that student as a high-cost student so that we can potentially get reimbursed some of the dollars that exceeds what we actually get for that student for their waiting. We never get the total amount, and it just depends on how many dollars are available at the state level that we do end up getting reimbursed, but we do try to get compensated back for those kids as much as we can.
And I understand that, but from my understanding, we can get caught in the middle between having a student that's a high-cost student and having one that's just not high cost, but we pay the high cost that doesn't exceed that high cost threshold. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Depending on their placement.
All right. Now let's talk. I mean, in-state, sometimes you recommend, or the IEP, and I don't know this process, but there's a recommendation for a contractor or somebody else to provide those services. And how do you vet those organizations or companies or people?
Well, what we look at there is we exhaust every possible option we have in district to serve our students. And some of the students become so incredibly needy that they exceed what our buildings and our teams are able to do. And we're still obligated to provide a free and appropriate public education for those kids. And so what I can tell you is, and I commend our building teams, because they attempt at every possible way, shape, form to serve the student until the last possible minute. And when it gets to my level, it'll be, we're simply not able to maintain the student any longer. And we have to look at other options. A unique situation we've had this year is we've had a few students, a handful, that have been so incredibly needy that we've had to look to other entities to help support us in that. And that doesn't come cheap, because we have to find a certain set of skills that can support us with the particular needs. Some of our kids that have very challenging needs, you know, we've sent to the Wittenmeyer Learning Center. Some of those places are not appropriate for some of the students with what their particular needs are, and we have to look outside of our typical realm of how we serve students and look at other options for us, and unfortunately none of those are cheap. We try in many of the cases, we want those to be short-term, and eventually our goal is always to get the student back into instructional control so they can go back to their program. But in the interim, we've ended up having to utilize some outside contracted agencies that are not cheap in order to help us in working with those challenging students. Our goal, though, is that they're never a long-term fix. They're a short-term until we get in place what we need to get in place so we can transition that student back to the public school. But those are not cheap. Those do go through the IEP team when we're looking at where are we at now with the next level of placement that we need to discuss, which then results in a contract coming to you, the board. One of the things that never is in our favor is time, because in many cases we can't take a lot of time in trying to get those services in place for kids if they need them now. And so that's part of, I think, what you see as the board when you see those quite expensive contracts come through. It's our last-ditch effort for students. I mean, it's the last straw. We try to exhaust every possible avenue we have, but we've had a handful this year that have exceeded what we or our counterparts, the AEA, who support us as well with behavior consulting and so forth, are able to do.
Part of the reason for my asking these questions is that it's different from our normal process with other contracts that we get involved with. Normally we have lowest responsible, responsive bidder and all this kind of stuff, or there's a matrix that the administration says here's how we get to this with an architect or something like that. And in this case what happens is that the contract comes pretty much from you,
Comes from our department.
And it's this is the way it is, and the appearance to me is that the costs, and whether I'm right or not, but it's my perspective, that the costs are increasing dramatically, whether that's true or not. And so that's why I'm curious if there's any way to, I mean, other than when you say sometimes it might be sense of urgency, and I'm thinking, okay, if sense of urgency, does it cost this if we could, by waiting another week, get this? And that's what I can't grasp.
And those are great questions you're asking. In many cases, when we are looking for outside consultants to help us, we have to look at what are the needs of the child. And so in many cases, you're looking for a unique set of expertise to come in and work with a student based on what their needs are. For a majority of our kids, if they can be served in a particular off-site facility, that's of course what we always want to do. Again, this year we've had a unique set of kids who have had very interesting challenges that our typical avenues will not fix and will not address. So we've had to look outside of that. So when we're looking for who can we look to help us, we're looking for a unique set of skills that those consultants possess, and those aren't cheap. When I say teams come to us at the last minute, it means we've had X number of people be injured. We've had a lot of injuries this year because of the particular needs of some of our students, and so we always try to take that in consideration as well, that our teaching staff and our paras and our other students all need to be safe. And so sometimes we do have to act with a sense of urgency if we're in a position where safety to a student or to others is at risk. And that does create that sense of urgency.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? If not, thank you very much.
One last question.
Oh, excuse me, Director
I wonder
Poole.
if you can give me a breakout of the cost of maintaining 6 birth through 2-year-old classrooms. Can you do that? Excellent.
$338,531.58.
The question was, what is the cost of maintaining the 6 birth through 2-year-old classrooms? And the answer was
$38,531.58.
I won't ask what that 58 cents is for, but thank you.
All right.
Being honest.
Thank you very much, Kathy and Patty.
Thanks.
Great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Move on to recruiting of minority educators.
Thank you. I'd like Deb Miller and Dr. Erica Goldstone to come forward. They've been doing a lot of work together. It's great to have the equity department, the HR department work on a joint project such as this, and they've got some very positive news, and I just want them to share with you.
Well, thank you very much for that resounding word.
Now, if they would turn off the cameras, we'd be really happy.
You want me to start, or you want to start?
Well, you've got the gift that you have, girl. So I don't think
Only
you
thing
would
I
start.
look, it is past my time to call it a day. This is really getting hard.
I thought that was a good plan. I know, you were offering.
sometimes it's good to be able to get up and just kind of move around.
I know what you mean.
You're not here though, I'm gonna feed all my cookies. It's up there, up there. They're raising it.
Oh, they're taking a little break.
There you go.
Well, Amelia said, I really know how to clear out a room. I mean, there's no.
We need to tell her.
That's on. Yes.
We wanted to thank you for giving us a chance to kind of share the direction and the goals that we have developed. We are able to do what we are doing because we have been working in tandem with each other. We have built on each other's strengths, each other's expertise, as well as bouncing ideas off of each other as we have developed our diversity initiative.
Uh-oh. Okay. So basically, our diversity initiative, has 4 different parts. There's a recruitment part, a grow your own program for adults and students, minorities in teaching program, and then student teaching opportunities. And what we realize that we need to do when we have all of these things in place is embrace our diversity, and we also have some initiatives going on with that. So we're going to talk for a few minutes about each one of these components. And the first one is recruitment, and I am in charge of the recruitment committee, and we have quite a group of people that have a history of being on the recruitment committee. And since both Dr. Goldstone and I are new this year, part of what we had to do as we started off was find out the history of what had gone on in both of our committees prior to us coming on board. So part of what the committee told me, and they are all very passionate about recruiting in Davenport, was that we needed a fresh look, that when we go to recruitment activities and fairs, our table was bland and it didn't really represent our district. So we worked really hard with Matt Pulford and Rachel Mullins, and I think that you had in part of your packet our trifold that has come out, and some of our paperwork that we are now able to hand out with when we go on our recruitment fairs. Part of what also came out in those committee meetings was that many times we go to recruitment fairs and we don't have positions to offer people, and so we're up against other districts that know their positions and can almost do some pre-interviews as they're visiting those fairs. So what we did this year with the help of Dr. Amelia and Bill Schnaden was look at doing our staffing projections for next year early. And I should say Patty Pace-Tracy was involved in that too, as she explained a little bit earlier in her presentation. We moved that all the way up to what would be occurring about right now with building principals about staffing calls right after our spring break was the tradition of how it had been done, all the way up to when we first came back to school after our winter break. So together we met with all of our buildings and we projected the staffing so that we could actually put together a list of potential positions. The other thing that I want to thank the board for that you all did to help us out was offer the early retirement incentive and offer it earlier this year. So we had an idea of just exactly what positions would be available, and we were able to hand that out with when we went on our recruitment fairs as well. The other thing that we wanted to do after we talk through things with our recruitment committee was to emphasize or put an emphasis on Midwestern recruitment fairs. There traditionally had been some visits to Arizona and to down south, Louisiana, and we had gotten no candidates from those fairs to come towards Davenport. So we decided when we looked at where we usually get our candidates from, that we should concentrate on the Midwest. And in a minute, I'll show you the fairs that we went to. So that all came out of that recruitment committee as well. Then the very exciting thing that we've got going on that came out of our recruitment committee was partnerships. And we've contracted with a company called Yardstick Consulting Firm. And we are doing a kind of a pilot where we are partnering with two campuses, Chicago State, which has a large minority population, and also Harris-Stowe, which is in St. Louis. And through our Yardstick consulting firm, we have an ambassador on our Chicago State campus who is helping us to get the word out about Davenport Community School District. So our Darren, our ambassador, is available to talk with students. He's got materials much like what we handed out today in your packets to hand out to potential candidates. He's asking them to look at the websites, and we actually, on one of our recruitment visits, was to Chicago State. And for the first time that I know of in the history of our recruiting in Davenport, we went up actually to the recruitment fair to Chicago a day early, and we had a reception that was attended by approximately 30 minority teaching candidates, and many of the professors from the campus also came. And so we were able to, in that reception, with about 10 people, Erica, did we take? We were able to really share some things about Davenport Community Schools and our jobs and our perspectives. So it was very positive. Extremely so. And then the other thing that we are going to talk about in a few minutes is a commitment to some minority teaching opportunities in Davenport. So these are the recruitment fairs that we went to, and there was a series of people that went to these, anywhere from 3 to 10 people. And since we've gone, we also came back. We had potential candidates fill out an information sheet, and many of the students also gave us resumes. Those have now all been uploaded into PDF files, and they're housed right now in our the well, and principals can get to those. And we've got the files separated out so that we can ensure that our minority candidates can be looked at, because what we know from our Apple Track system that we use with applications, there's nothing that helps a principal know which candidates they should choose. So the files that we've put together are because we've talked with the candidates and because we think that they're good, viable candidates for potential employment in our district. And these are members of our recruitment team. And it's a combination of administrators, past educators, current educators, community members, and then teachers in the district. Joe, can you show the video now? The next piece that I just wanted to share with you, because we wanted to make our district shine a little bit, Jamie Krager, who's one of the administrative assistants in HR, put together a video, and you'll probably notice some of the clippings on this because we took some things from the board presentations when the schools highlight their success stories. So.
And this is what we would run on a continuous kiosk as we were at the recruitment fairs. And it's a great job of depicting not only the district but the city scenes as well.
I'm not sure where it is. Joe, can you see?
I think somebody took your flash drive.
Oh, no.
Probably this individual.
Oh, funny. Okay, well, never mind.
It was
It's a good
simply
video.
outstanding.
Let me. And Joe, you didn't put it on the desktop at all?
No, that one, no.
Okay.
Oh, my heavens.
I'm sorry.
It certainly isn't there.
Okay, so Joe, can you get the PowerPoint back up? That's it, I think. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There you go, dear.
I'm
going to look in my purse just in case.
One of the things that Deb said as we were beginning our work with the equity committees, it was trying to get a historical framework as we began our journey this year. And in that, the equity committee was charged with developing a plan, as I described, with legs of growing your own. The first part of it was students, identifying students, and I was so excited to hear JB, it fits right in. But having, there was a time in this district, minorities in teaching was a very effective tool to get students interested, into getting a good education, moving on to college, and then hopefully going into education and coming back. This is like a rebirth of that program, except in that particular time there were some funds available. This is without funding. We are looking at having a 4 through 12 grade program. Right now we are starting at the high school. We are in the midst of planning a trip to University of Northern Iowa with some high school students. We do have a program that is currently in place at West High School, the EDU class. It has been in existence at West about 3 years. We have teachers identified for Central and North, and we hope that in the fall we will have programs in each of our high schools. So some of the people on the equity committee are focused on the student component. What are the kinds of activities that students can be gainfully engaged in that will, again, show the benefits of having a very strong academic experience, having them go into high school with the understanding they are going to graduate from high school, go on to college, and then we hope go into education. So we will be providing lots of experiences, helping to reinforce the value of an education. The other aspect of the Grow Your Own is adults, identifying parents of color in the district, offering them support to go back to college, or if they have a degree, going in and picking up that education piece, that we can ultimately hire those pairs as future teachers with education degrees as well. One of the best and sustaining way of increasing the diversity in the district is through Grow Your Own. It's not a fast way, but it is a sustaining way. Having a pipeline of students coming through who we will continually talk about the value, the importance, and the contribution of going into education and then becoming teachers in this district. Those are people that are on the equity committee. Very much like the recruitment, we have some administrators, we have some retired teachers, we have a lot of teachers on the committee as well who are helping to guide us as we build our plan for increasing diversity internally through our Grow Our Own, whether it's the adult part of it or the student part. I kind of talked about minorities in teaching, and it is a 4 through 12, although we are right now starting only at the high school. When there was minority in teaching active in the district, it had a very strong UNI partnership. Deb and 2 other people and I went to UNI, and we are reestablishing or revitalizing that partnership. UNI is quite interested in building a very strong collaborative relationship. And in fact, their recruiter was in the district last week. They met with us, they met with the Equity Committee to share the importance of that partnership. Deb talked about our Chicago State University partnership. We are very, very excited. I often describe our trip there as being treated as royalty. But one of the things, as we were introduced, the assistant dean said, we have now become part of the CSU family. So we're quite excited about that. Talked about the EDU course. I don't remember, but someone, I think it was Pat Zamora, was talking about the goal of the district is for students at the high school level to be able to get dual credit, high school as well as college. The EDU class that is currently at West that will go into operation at the other two high schools, you can earn college credit while you are in that class. So we're very excited. Right now we're starting with clubs at the other two high schools to begin to recruit students that we will have classes made at the other two. As we are working with UNI, the important pieces of that EDU are admission readiness, that you are leaving high school prepared to be successful in college. Academic readiness, having that academic support, background, and classes that, again, you will be ready. Personal and social readiness, all of those things that every principal is and other building administrators and teachers are always talking about. Consistent daily attendance, timeliness, learning to set goals, to accomplish those goals, completion of homework, all of those things are part of that personal social readiness. Career readiness, exiting high school, understanding what you need to do to become eligible for the career of your choice, of which we are pushing education, and that financial readiness. UNI has some very specific money geared for students of color to help in that financial readiness. But as you are coming into high school and well before you're ready to graduate, having those things in line and in place will help in your success at college.
And I think it's important to also say that many of the members on the recruitment committee came through the Minorities in Teaching program when it was first established in Davenport. And in sitting around and learning about the history of just the recruitment committee, much of what those people went through when they were in the program came up. And I remember specifically Tanya Martinez, who said, I never knew it was a possibility before Minorities in Teaching for me to go to school. And to me, that's a huge aha of why we need to be doing this. And I think both Dr. Goldstone and I were very encouraged by the fact that UNI said with the financial support that they can provide, it might be possible for these kids to come out with between a $10,000 and $20,000 loan at the end of a 4-year program, which is pretty good in this day and age. So we're very excited about that, and again about revitalizing that partnership.
I'd just like to add on to one of the things that Deb just said. The strength of this is, as a district, supporting the needs of students and adults, and then offering them employment as they come out. And we do have teachers in our district today who have come through the Minority in Teaching. I got a phone call Monday morning, and there was this voice, and it's encouraging to know that our work is kind of getting around the district. And she introduced herself and said, hey, I heard that you are doing this. I know I'm just getting around to contacting you. Can I become a member of this committee? And of course, we don't have timelines. Whenever you have time, come. And she said, it's really important to me, and this is part of my commitment back to Davenport. And she was the first graduate that was hired in this district through the Minorities in Teaching, and has been in this district those years later. So I was so excited. She said her children are very busy, but she had just decided, I've got to do it before this year has ended. Asked her mother to transport the students to music and dance and all the other activities so that she could come and become a part, because she feels she is where she is because of that program.
So the next piece is our student teaching initiative. And again, we feel that if we can get people here, we can keep them here. So we are really committed to trying to have some student teachers here this year working with us. We have these two houses that the Davenport Community School District owns that are over by the Brady Street Stadium. We are in the process of trying to furnish them, and we are using community partnerships to help with that. And our goal is to have students come and do their student teaching experience here with us, with the hope of a potential employment contract if they are successful at the end of their student teaching experience. And we are also looking at running a mentoring program for these student teachers that will be modeled somewhat after the 2-year mentoring program that we have for new teachers, to get them not only acclimated to our district but also acclimated to our community.
One of the things that I was asked when I was sharing the vision, and that was, okay, so you bring people of color here, then what happens? And that part is very dependent upon embracing the strength of diversity that this district can build. With that in mind, we were able to do some consulting work with Dr. Adams. He began with a survey offered to all DCSD employees to complete that kind of looked at what are your views, what are your perceptions of diversity in this district. We also have staff development for building administrators as well as teacher cohorts around this idea of the strength diversity will bring to this district. And we are operating under a train the trainer, that the building cohort will be trained, and then they will take this information back to each of the building. We have also looked at training secretaries who become a vital component. Sometimes parents will come in and they're not very happy, and the first people that they typically see will be building secretaries. We need to have secretaries understanding that we need to embrace, again, all of the diversity of families, of students, of potential employees. We have also offered diversity training to our parents in the district. So we've tried to approach this as a very comprehensive plan, that while we bring people of color into the district, they will be welcomed, they will not be feared, they will be embraced, because there truly is strength in the diversity of this district.
And so I think, you know, I don't think either Dr. Goldstone or I want to give the impression that we aren't on an uphill battle. We have a lot of work to do. I think that we can both speak to the fact that when we go around to these recruitment fairs, there are very few people of color that you see. That is nationwide, from what I understand and what we've been reading about. And that's why we, I think, are in agreement that with our Grow Your Own and the minority student teaching phases of this whole plan, we might have a better potential for candidates. So, that's yeah. Any questions?
Any discussion? Director DeFau.
Not a question so much as a comment. I'm really glad to see us, delving into this grow your own phenomena. In my own experience, I know several students that are interested in coming back and being part of the district and helping to shape the future of our district. When we talk about enrichment opportunities and that model and focusing on the high school students, and knowing there's limited resources to provide some enrichment opportunities, there are a couple cohorts in the district. One is the Wood cohort that's currently 11th grade students, and I believe the other cohort is perhaps JB, that are part of that Gear Up cohort.
Gear Up is in the 11th grade, currently 11th grade
right.
students, and all of the intermediates other than Sudlow and Walcott.
Okay. So, I know from personal experience that there's opportunities there to be reimbursed for college visits and things like that. So, I hope that we're looking at that as a possible resource to fund excursions.
Oh, absolutely, because we are united in our belief. For many students, as Deb gave the example, we have got to get students to understand this is a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
This is not just pie in the sky. So part of that is to get students' feet on the soils of the university. This year they will be going, I think it's April 18th, to UNI. We might be able to squeeze in one more before the end of the year. But in terms of our future, that will be a major component. And we will do some local, but sometimes when you see a place like St. Ambrose, which is a fabulous institution, but sometimes it doesn't have the same bang when you are passing it multiple times a day. We are certainly not going to bypass our local institutions. I am an Augie alum, so I am very much tied to the Quad Cities, but giving them an opportunity to get into numbers of campuses, to experience it, to talk to students, to be able to even get into some classes so that they will know they too can sit where they see these other students sitting.
That's one of the things that many of the people on the committees that had been through the Minorities in Teaching program shared with us, Nikki, was that college visit also had a huge impact on them. You know, to finally start to begin to understand that maybe it was a possibility, and to kind of be in awe of everything from the cafeteria to going to the classes. And Dr. Webb, the Dean of the College of Education at Cedar Falls, is really committed to doing whatever he needs to do to help us with this, even coming here and talking with the kids about the readiness skills that they need to have. So we're very excited about it.
Anyone else? Director Sherwood?
Yeah, you're doing great work. I want to mention also that Tom Carpenter at Ambrose, the head of Ambrose Education, is a guy who is very dedicated to social justice issues, and he has a plan to recruit for Ambrose out of Chicago to try to bring minorities into Ambrose. And they theoretically would be student teaching with us then. Mm-hmm. So this community piece, this piece where young people, when they come into this district, whether they're coming in directly off of your efforts, or they're coming in off of Augustana's efforts or Ambrose's efforts, they have to be made to feel welcomed, and that this is their second home before they leave. It's a real key thing. So working with the neighborhood organizations, the churches, the city, and all that, and I know you're doing this already, but that's a big deal. And I think that the other piece about it, as far as the district-wide thing, and having this district be as welcoming as possible, and having kids see people like them, we can't just limit our efforts to the teaching force. Well, that's very important. This has to be in other places. We see very few people of color in the administration, for instance, of this district. We see, probably less numbers than we could in the nursing corps and those sorts of things. So we have to look at all these areas of the district to build that strength and throughout the district. But thank you for your efforts.
Anyone else? Director Crumwoody?
First of all, I want to applaud your efforts for doing the work that you're doing, and especially with the rebirth of the Minorities in Education program. I was around for several years when we were doing this in our elementary schools, and it was pretty exciting. Chris Hester led the project, and we did employ, and I can't even remember some of their names, but I know there were two twin sisters, Mary and Carrie, who we ended up hiring, who went through the program from elementary school on, which it's just really exciting to see that sort of thing happen. So I applaud your efforts. Just a couple of questions that I had is, first of all, you mentioned paras. And again, I think that is wonderful because throughout the years, I've had some opportunities. I know there's a reading specialist at Fillmore who once was a paraeducator at Truman. And to see that sort of thing happen in this district, I think is really, really exciting. What are you doing to encourage paraeducators to get involved into teaching? What steps are being taken with that?
Well, one of the things that the committee is looking at, how to get the word out. Once you get the word out, there would be an application process. As part of that dossier would be recommendations from the teacher who would know their work, the building principal, etc. But once we get this plan completed, we will then get some words out and say, we are very committed, we want you to apply, we are going to develop a rubric. As I have talked to the Grow Your Own committee that's looking at the adult piece, it is not such a big deal theoretically for year one. Where the money begins to hit you is year 4. Because if you have picked up, say, 3 people each of those years, by year 4, you're carrying a pretty good load. So initially, we have to go small and make sure that we have a full board support and the money is earmarked, that by year 4, we're not saying, you know, we really are committed, but we don't have the money. We have to do this slowly so that we really do develop a pipeline. This is not what we have talked about, what I have been pretty much like a broken record about. We can't do this as a flash in the pan. We have to build a system that will be self-sustaining. And in doing that, from the very beginning, we have to do it with an eye. Where will we be at year 4? How many people will we be able to support at year 4? Because those first 4 years are going to really be the tail of the tape. That then we go to year 8. But we got to get through the first 4 years. But we're going to do lots of backdoor approaches of talking to building principals, saying, hey, be sure you encourage some people to apply, and then we'll do the front door of the typical kind of application. But my experience has been one of the most effective is to get other people to encourage this person to move forward.
Erica, you're absolutely right. I think those people who have already got those relationships with those people working in their buildings, that's going to change their behaviors and getting more interested.
Absolutely.
My last question has to do with student teachers and your housing program. And can you tell me a little bit more about that, you said, first of all, would it be free? Would the housing be taken care of?
Yeah.
Without cost.
They're district houses, so we know that if we want these kids to come and be here in our community, we have to somehow provide them support to do that. And if they were doing their student teaching up at Chicago State, for instance, or we've had some contact with Western Illinois, they would be living on campus. So we know that we need to take that piece away from them. And we had originally started having conversations, and Rachel had been a part of this, Rachel Mullins, with the city, because apparently the city has some properties. And then Rachel found out for us that the district has 2 houses over by Brady Street Stadium. So Erica and Kendall Owa. Kendall is also helping with this because there's some Title I dollars with some of the consulting that's going on. Went over and looked at the homes, and they're in pretty good condition. They're unfurnished right now, and so that's what we're in the process of doing right now with help from community agencies such as NAACP and the churches, as were spoken about a few minutes ago, to try and get the houses furnished and up and running. For one of the homes we think will hold 4 people and the other one's 6, so we have the potential for 10 people. You know, we probably are going to start small just to make sure that we're doing everything right for the kids and for the district.
Well, that's an exciting idea, but I also heard you say, Deb, that we would hope that they would stay after doing this. Could we not make a commitment that they would have to stay in our district for at least a couple of years?
One of the things that we have been talking about, and that is writing a specific document, having our district attorney review it to make sure that we're not requiring. But yes, as we have talked, what we want is a minimum of 2 or 3 years, and it has to be the district out, not the student in, with the caveat they have successfully completed student teaching and that there is a vacancy of which they are eligible to be hired. So it has to be worded that because you do this, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed employment. It still has to be under the district reaching out to that student. But yes, that has been one of our conversations because the district has offered financial resources to that student, and the goal is for that student who has successfully completed student teaching and where there is an opening, then they stay here and we hire.
Okay, thank you.
Director Kluhl.
I feel twice as important now. I got recognized twice. Erica, you talked about the fact that this has got to be system-wide, and I just wanted you to know that the board has gotten involved with Dr. John Quincy Adams and had our training with him, and a very interesting training session. One of the things that he talked about was the fact that in order for us to really accept, understand, and appreciate minorities, we had to appreciate our own diversity first. So we spent some time going through that, and I thought it was pretty important. As a result of that presentation, Dr. Tate came up with some numbers for the board. And he said we have 16% of our food service workers are minorities, 13% of our paras are minorities, and 4.5% are teachers. And obviously it's important to have those minorities present in all facets of the school, but to have that kind of imbalance in the non-professional world is very significant to our minority children. So, and understand too that it is a national problem, that we're not dealing with this on our own. One of the things that I appreciate is that you're trying to let people know what it is that they're in for. You're trying to find out what jobs, what positions there are. But if I were looking for a job, even as a new student, I think that I would not only want to know what district I'm going to, but I would want to know what school I'm going to. And that's something we can't do, that other districts do. Is that correct? Do you find that that's the case, that people really would like to know what school they're going to, because it makes a big difference?
And I would say that with our earlier staffing patterns this year, we are more able to do that this year than we probably have been in the past, and I would hope that that would continue, because we went to some of the fairs and were able to say very specifically what the positions were and what school they would be in. Now, do we know all of them? No, but I'm hopeful that you know, part of the staffing thing this year, it might have even been a little bit earlier, but because of the boundary discussions, we knew that that would impact staffing, so we held off for a little bit of time. But I'm hopeful that we can continue to do those in a timely fashion so that we actually do know buildings when we go to recruitment fairs.
Yeah. I think it would be important.
Yeah.
It's an issue of dignity, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I did spend some time that ended up being not particularly productive. But I did at least find out the superintendent's name of Chicago Public Schools. And as I was going through their website, it is quite lengthy and it provides you almost no information. But because in the news they're talking about multiple schools that they will be closing in Chicago, I am going to see if I can make contact to see if Davenport perhaps can have a place at the table that as teachers may actually be eliminated out the door. And I know that they're going to probably absorb quite a bit with retirements, etc. But still seeing, can Davenport perhaps be at the table offering some opportunities for employment here? But in doing that, we're going to really have to build a good relationship with the superintendent. We don't need the duds of anybody's district. We need the very, very best. And as soon as I can kind of whittle through that, I can't even find an address, but it's going to all come together. And I have a friend that works in Chicago Public Schools, and so I'm kind of going through him to provide some information to see if we can get in conversation with the superintendent of Chicago Public Schools.
We've certainly done our share of sending Iowa teachers to Illinois. It would be nice to see them reciprocate a little bit. It's all about collaboration these days with a lack of funding. I'm glad that you've revised or reinvigorated the UNI partnership. And I wonder if you've also worked with the UEN and their training school at UNI.
No.
That would be a connection to make, I think. Because they're vested in their training program there too, and there's certainly some symbiotic things going on here. The other thing is Sarah Harris is involved with Quad Cities Interfaith in a program to try to determine what the barriers are to our young people in finding employment. So I would suggest you get with Sarah and see where she's at on that, because again, there's an alliance there with what you're trying to do.
And she is on our equity committee, which
Good.
is really good.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you.
Director Zamora.
Yeah, a couple things. First, I don't know if you know it, but one of our teachers here in the district, her brother is the head of special ed for all the Chicago schools.
Who is that?
I'll tell you later. I'll give you her name.
Any name I can get?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, because we've used him before as a resource.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and then secondly, are we on the search for other minorities rather than just people of color? We talked about expanding our Spanish program, and it would seem to me we should be looking for Asian people. We should be looking for
Oh, absolutely.
Hispanics.
I put all of a variety of ethnicities under that umbrella. When I say that, I am not talking about simply African Americans, but a very wide spectrum.
We really, the goal of this whole process and these committees is we want our teaching population, our employment, all of our employment population to mirror our student population. So it is tough.
Anything else? I've got a couple. Following up on Director Zamora's question, I was curious because you used several terms during your presentation. One was minorities, one was diversity, and another phrase was persons of color. And I was curious whether each one of those have a different definition in the way that you're using the words in the presentation.
I can speak for me. I detest minority. Minority implies inferiority. I personally don't like it, but that is a very descriptive word. So typically when I speak, I talk about people of color or students of color, but it's all the same.
But earlier, I mean, if it's all the same, but you say persons of color, I mean, that's, for me, it's very confusing. Okay. Because persons of color, for me, does kind of connote African Americans or, well, I'm saying for me.
Okay.
Okay. So describe what if a minority is a bad word.
That's to me.
Okay. But then why do you use it in your presentation?
Well, that was probably my word. And I don't think of it maybe in the same terms as Erica because we have different experiences.
And that's okay.
See, we've had a little diversity training, so beware.
You're dangerous, huh?
Yeah.
Well, and so then if we use the term persons of color, but you say it doesn't mean African American, or can you describe a little bit more what persons of color would mean?
It's an interchangeable with minority. It is anyone who is not of the primary race, which is Caucasian. That's my thing. And again, this is me. And part of what you do in terms of embracing, it doesn't mean that because one person uses one word, it is bad in and of itself. I am not offended when other people do. I don't like it. I typically do not talk about minorities. I talk about folks of color, students of color, persons of color. But it does not denote for me African Americans. It means if you are of Asian descent, if you are of Latino, whatever, it is a very inclusive and not exclusive term for me.
Well, I don't want to belabor it, but where I'm going is that as a board member, I get hammered for all sorts of minorities. And a minority might be white female, and it might be white males, depending on all these different things. And it's like, holy cow. And so it's very, very difficult for me. I'm trying to, I think I understand what all of this is, and I believe that what you're really driving for is diversity, minorities, persons of color, meaning non-Caucasian people. Right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Deb, is that the way you understand it too? Okay. I guess I'll leave it at that. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentations.
Thank you.
All right, Superintendent Tate, we'll move on to boundaries.
Show and tell tonight. I'm going to have Scott put maps on this table. He can clear it. That table over there, and Dr. O, if you could move your stuff off, I'd like to use that table. We've been talking about boundaries for a long time. We've thrown things up on the wall, and I asked Scott to actually take some city maps he had and put the boundaries on those so we could look up the road network, so you could actually take a bird's eye view and look at the elementary, the intermediate, and the high school boundaries. Just to remind you where we are, we have been talking about a new feeder system, and I gave you a copy, proposed intermediate and high school feeder system with some changes where Sudlow School is no longer being split and is going central as a feeder to central. Williams Elementary School is now split between west and north, and Adams Elementary is also split between Williams and north. All that in an effort to try to balance, at least if you just look at the boundaries themselves, the utilization of the three high schools, where we have settled upon the current boundaries, as you can look on the maps and see. Central would be 70%, north 67%, and west 66%. So I think we pretty well settled on boundaries which will work. Not to say that we have solved what our transfer or diversity plan will be. It's simply, here are our boundaries that will work as far as utilization of the building, and also if you're looking at the A-B ratio. So what I'd like to do is just invite you to get up and to look at these maps, question Scott, who is the expert on any of them, and then see if from looking at these maps you have any further questions or guidance to us as we continue to draw boundaries. But also I know that you're going to be talking at a later meeting about your diversity plan.
Just a cautionary measure. I am not even an amateur artist, let alone a professional artist. So I just spent a lot of time this weekend trying to get down what we had captured through all of our conversations. So
I'd invite you just to get up and take a look at them. We'll try. Okay, we've been talking about when you can actually take a picture of the
Yeah,
scene.
sorry.
We can do each boundary like that.
Okay, it's right here.
Right, I know it's
Yep.
big, but, you know, I think part of the feedback we're gonna get is that we're not being open.
We'll do everything we can. We've been talking.
This is all here,
Correct.
circle.
Correct.
And where I was confused the other night were streets. So where, this is Northwest Boulevard?
That's Northwest Boulevard, yes.
How are you tonight?
Good, how are you doing, Steve?
What you're saying now is this entire area. Oh, wait,
No, it's inside the purple.
Yeah.
What would be the Harrison. Yeah, everything here.
Yeah.
With the exception of this part we took out from Harrison and to go to Truman.
And where is that?
That's, as you go out, Welcome Way, I think it's 57th, 59th Street, and then you turn left. Well, the reason that right now we transport those students anyway because they're cut off from the rest of the.
And where do they go?
Well, they go to Harrison, but we transport them to here and then all the way back down 53rd and then to Harrison. So it's really just a little bit farther. This map's a little different. Seems to be a little closer spatially than actually what it is. It's actually quite a ways when you bring them all the way down to 53rd and over. And then this used to be, this was Harrison.
Yeah.
This part right here.
Right. That's
and
that's what I was trying to figure out.
Okay.
This entire area right over here is now becoming Fillmore.
Correct.
Right?
This was Fillmore. All of this originally was Fillmore.
But as you go north on Marquette,
correct,
you can only go to 59. These people over here can walk right to Harrison School. You now have them all going to Fillmore.
To Fillmore.
Which really concerns me. You have walkers to Harrison, this entire area.
So what are you gonna do? I mean, it's
Are
full.
you sure they're walkers?
Yes, they are. If you go,
Because you've got the creek right there.
this is
Behind
Marquette.
Harrison.
You go down Marquette, and you go to 59. All that new housing addition where the Nappers live, you know, where they live, that all is Harrison now. That will all become Fillmore. I have a real concern about that whole area. Because
Can you circle that as a...
What are we gonna do? Let's just talk about it.
We're taking an area that is bus, Kimberly Village, and we've switched that.
Yeah.
Now we have walkers going to an entirely different school, which will all be buses.
And we offset that with, we moved that line up to, I think it's 65th. So Truman was about right here at the original Truman line. And we moved it up to 65th, so to capture more of Fillmore.
And that makes sense. It's this that I was concerned about the other night, because here we got a whole neighborhood, and we were expressing our concerns about the neighborhood. This is the Harrison neighborhood. These are kids who walk to Harrison. This whole area, I live right here. That also is Harrison. Larry lives right over here. That used to be Harrison. It's now all Fillmore.
Right.
That doesn't concern me, even where I live. I've always thought that should be Fillmore, because it's almost walking distance. Now that they've got sidewalks and they now put stoplights in here.
Yeah, there are no sidewalks along. Is there a stoplight here now at the cross?
Sidewalks all the way up.
Is there?
So we're taking the whole area from a neighborhood school and busing. Well, there's a field here. These people have to all be bused.
Those They are, you're exactly right, they are as well, I said, but they're just bus to Fillmore instead. This is the current Fillmore line.
You guys have a huge population, the whole population.
Cloud over what you do, and no matter what decisions you guys make, you get people that aren't happy and people that are happy, and,
When you got
it's a
area over
position to be
here
in.
that's already
I think, I have a lot of respect for you guys, and the efforts that you put into making sure the kids are taken care of, a priority, changes stuff.
I know that name, you've spoken.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, you've spoken of it once. So,
Well, right now,
it's
okay,
interesting.
right
that
now I'm
you
kind of
notice
elementary.
a lot of people come to
No, it doesn't,
It's something
it
that
just doesn't
is
make
always
sense
interesting.
that we would
If you
take
get a chance to give me a
kids
call,
out of the neighborhood and bus
I'd like to just talk about stuff. It's great that
This is a field.
Yeah,
more,
right now it is.
more citizens concerned involved.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I gotta get back, but thanks.
As I said, my goal is not to take another pocket, 100 kids, and kind of open wall class because nobody's going to have to get
And your concern.
And it's a big concern because when does North Carolina when it becomes
I guess,
in my mind.
since these are all bus, these are bus to Fillmore now, and they have to come out the same way down to the third, back to Division and up. So,
I'd like to know how many kids are, this is a big chunk of
this is a big chunk of Fillmore. This is really, because there's quite a few, actually, right here. Brian and Hoover.
So, and then this whole area here, which is presently here, right?
Actually, that is Harrison. That is Harrison. Right here. Right here. It's Western Avenue.
Filters was
all that
increased capacity.
Where's
North High School. It's 53rd. It's actually right there.
You can go anywhere you want to, no matter how fast. If you're going to let them go, it has to be.
I think there's about 45 in this area. There's at least that many. Right here. It's very crowded.
Booming.
Putting up houses every day out there.
So that's like
pretty good. I continue my
Yeah.
bus people.
Yeah.
You look in that area right now. Where I live, Larry lives, Coalfield right there. This used to be all field. It's now about right there.
Well, that would be, you got this pocket, and you also have this area, it's also filling in. I don't think they'll do anything up here. This is actually what Forest Grove or 67.
We're in.
Right here.
So that whole chunk.
There's 63 kids right here.
That came out of Eisenhower.
Right.
That makes sense.
Those are residences.
I mean,
this is Jersey Ridge as it comes down. It's Eisenhower. Right. It is following some creek down. Of course, they don't put the creeks on their map. So it's freehand. But, yeah, so it ends right here. Actually, this is, we've got 46 is the dividing line. One side's Clarkfield, the other side is
other, this was a big change. What other big changes
At the elementary?
at the elementary?
This section west of Fairmont to Buffalo, that's been consistent from when we started. So there's maybe 30 students in this area that we pulled out. That was mainly because we were trying to get the students to Buffalo, but also we're picking up kids right here and taking them, you know, we have the bus already there, and we can utilize the bus in a more efficient manner. But they're going different directions.
Well, we moved lots of lines down
Well,
here.
Adams is substantial. Everything west of Cat was, this was Madison, this was Garfield. This, we extended this out just to, correct. Yeah, everything from Central Park down, this area right here, and then through the housing. Actually, it's kept it there. There's quite a few that live in the apartments through this area. And then this is Madison. One right here, we moved these kids from Adams to Jefferson. We have a crossing guard right here that helps them cross every day at Locust, and that it's just more contiguous to Jefferson. Actually, it's probably walk zone. Probably walk zone from home.
Well, that's fine.
Okay. Well, Ken, you want me to get those numbers for you?
Yeah, I'd like
This
to
area
know
right
the
here?
number of kids, that whole area.
Oh, okay. Everything north of
Everything north of
59.
59. Wait a minute, I was getting confused when I was
Yeah, that's
Truman went up to, it used to be 62nd.
yeah, that's right.
Now goes up to
65th, right.
and the colors cross
Yeah, it makes it difficult because you're splitting through the neighborhood where this is a circle, so we'll have a bus in there. You know,
Very
pick up.
honest with you, all these people. They walk.
Now we could take it down to 67 press line and capture this group, so it's not quite so isolated, because they are isolated from Fillmore, because there's no way, this is empty, there's no way to cross. Right there. It's actually, it's quite a bit, right through that area too.
Yeah, that is a ton of kids out there, so I don't think it's even going, I used to think, go all the way, pick up to Truman, but I don't think there's any Truman campus.
Our issue right now is that we're at 105%.
But if you grab here, can you put this back to Harrison?
Yeah, see, I don't know. That would make more sense to me.
I think there depends how many there are. It'd be give or take a few. Now, what we also did was we dropped Truman down here to 51st. Yeah, so because there's part streets that come down through here that actually we run buses there at Buchanan. Used to be Buchanan. We'd run a bus in to run them back to Buchanan.
Yeah, that was
and they were
a whole group of people that used to come anyway.
yeah.
So now you're going all the way down to
Yeah, just capturing, because it squares it off with these partial roads here that drop down that work in Buchanan. Their kids were in that, should have been closer to Truman. Their walks up from Truman.
well, like I said, they're all walkers. Harrison, neighborhood that's a neighborhood. And now we'd be busing Belmont
through both of these, or through this entire area. Basically north of 59.
That's also probably the fastest area.
Right. Well,
it's not going to be true in there.
No, we are going to renovate and create space.
Could be
Comparisons of capacity, determines of capacity, and this is your point. Where are you going to put them? You're going to have and then you have
Right.
There's no roads. There's no streets, because you got to come all the way down to Marquette over. Someday.
I'll guarantee you, my daughter, like,
How's she going over? Does she go down to Pine and up? Oh, she walked to Division, wouldn't she?
No, she walks up the backside.
Doesn't,
She walks up the backside.
yeah, you're right here.
I cringe when I see those kids walking across or around down.
I'm back. I'm off the runner.
So she's walking through up to the table.
Hey, you two, have you seen this? We should get back to this meeting.
Oh, I know. There's no light.
Okay.
Well, we've got
Well,
been here every year.
Yeah. Well, they've got a crossing right here on this side, but not on, maybe even the other side as well. But it becomes promote the walking, becomes a liability, really. I mean, it's for the city too, because there is no way. When I've taken calls from people that live maybe down in this area, I've said, well, walk down to Division and up. That would be the best way, rather than cutting through and walking up Northwest. I wouldn't walk up Northwest.
But in terms of time, they're going to go up Northwest because it's faster.
Right, it's shorter.
I'm ready for something.
Let's go ahead and continue the discussion.
I'd just like to see what guidance or comments that you have. I think it's useful for me to see them on a city map, so I'd be interested in where to go from here.
Okay. Other comments by the board? Director Crumity.
Yes, and I thank you, Dr. Tate and Scott, for putting this information together. And that's why I asked for it at the last meeting, because as I was looking at the information that was presented to us, I wasn't sure about the streets and the markings and so forth, so I appreciate you making very clearly those streets. And I've already shared with Scott a whole area north of 59th Street, which is presently Harrison District, and Scott is going to find out how many students are actually there and how many students are walkers, how many students are busers.
Correct.
But I would venture to say that's probably the fastest growth area in Davenport right now. Houses are going up every day out there. And that is a Harrison neighborhood area. Kids walk to school. 59th's not very far from 53rd and just a couple blocks over. The way this revision is made, and that's what really caught my eye the other night, is that that area, a lot of those kids who are walkers would now all be bused over to Fillmore School. And they can't walk over to Fillmore School because there are no streets. It's a field right now, and that field doesn't open up to Division Street. So I want us to really take a serious look at that, because I think we're taking a neighborhood, and a lot, I venture to say there's quite a few kids in that area that attend Harrison, and we're busing them over to Fillmore. So that's my biggest concern, and Scott also explained to me some of the other larger impacts that the revisions have made. Truman, that whole Truman area kind of concerns me, and I'm wondering if we can go further north to pick up kids between coming off Pine Street and going north, where we have a bunch of kids north of, what is it, 62nd, I think it cuts off now, 62nd. Those students presently go to Fillmore, and I've always wondered why they did not attend Truman, because, again, they could walk right down the street to Truman School. Instead, now are those students bused over to Fillmore? Because they have to cross Northwest Boulevard.
They would, yes.
So we're taking...
There is a light. There is a crossing at Northwest, but it's at 67th, which is quite a ways up.
So we're taking that group of kids, busing them, which they could also walk to Truman School. I really want us to take a look at that, because those are two areas that really concern me. And then there's also a pocket that presently attends Harrison that we're, according to the recommendation, going to take that pocket and send it over to Truman School. It seems to me that there might be some way we can fix that Fillmore area, but I'm not sure about north of 59th, the kids that live right north of Harrison School, because they have to be bused. They can't walk over to Fillmore because it's all field.
Anybody else? Director DeFile.
I appreciate Director Crumwitty's concern, but I also think that you're presuming a static community, because by your own recognition, this is one of the fastest growing areas of the school district in the city. That field is not going to remain field. It's going to become houses, and it's going to become streets, and it's going to have children that are going to then potentially have the ability to walk, because the infrastructure is going to be put in place by the city. You know, we look at boundaries once every 10 years, 7 years. You know, while there may be an immediate need to bus, I don't think that's going to be a long-term need. And the fact that Harrison is overcrowded, Truman is overcrowded, there's only one school in that area that can assume that new growth and that new student population, and that's Fillmore. You know, so I agree that perhaps we could move Truman's boundary further north and take that pocket that's on the east side, because it doesn't make sense to me that one little pocket on the far east corner is going to go to Truman. You know, and maybe that population then could shift either to Harrison or over to Fillmore, so that there's a more clear demarcation between Fillmore and Harrison boundaries. That makes sense to me. But that area will grow. There will be streets. And, you know, I can't imagine another board's going to take this on in another 10 years, you know.
Director DeFaw, are you talking this section over?
I'm talking about that Truman pocket.
Just this pocket.
Director Cronin.
In the original recommendations, which included Kimberly Village going over to Adams, And now we've put that pocket of people back in to Harrison School, and I can understand other kinds of concerns, but right now just concentrating on the elementary, if you left that alone as far as feeding into Adams, then there wouldn't be a whole issue with those kids north of 59th, north of Harrison, which is only 6 or 8 blocks away, busing them over to Fillmore. And I think that would, the original recommendation makes more sense to me than doing what we're doing here.
Any additional discussion? Director DeFau?
I'd be very interested to know the distance between Kimberly Village and Adams, and the distance between the neighborhood off of Marquette and Fillmore. Because if they're both neighborhoods that are going to be bused, and the contention is that one neighborhood should be bused over another, I'd be interested in knowing what the difference is in terms of mileage.
This Kimberly Village, this area was always going to be bused to Adams because of the safety busing.
Director Crumwoody is contending that it's more detrimental to bus the Marquette neighborhood to Fillmore than it would be Kimberly Village to Adams. And so I'd like to know the mileage differential between the two. You know, the fact remains that by taking Kimberly Village and moving it to Adams and Williams, we're going to create an environment just as we have in the northeast corridor of this community, where those students are going to want to go to West. We cannot continue to create areas of this school district that naturally end up depleting the enrollment of a building in our community. It's not tenable for the building. It takes away educational opportunities. 200 students that belong in the North attendance area do not attend it. That equates every 36 students is a teacher, is a class, is an educational opportunity lost to those students. I think they deserve to be treated equitably. I am grateful that the superintendent listened to those families and to the impact this policy has on North High School, and are trying to afford it some stability of enrollment.
Any additional discussion? Director Crumwoody.
And I too appreciate that we've given the parents from the original recommendations, we've given parents in this community several weeks to come forward to open forums that we've held throughout the district, to come, and many have come to our open forums. I would, if these recommendations are carried forward, I would hope that we would give all of our parents in this community the same time, the same opportunities that we've given other parents in this community. It's only fair, it's only right that we do that before we would make a recommendation as a board to go through with these boundary changes.
Director DeFau.
I agree with Director Crumwoody. That's why I asked for this meeting to be televised and recorded, so that people would get the information as an initial step, so they're aware. So I agree with you. People need to be informed, need to have that opportunity.
And I'll say I partially agree. I think that the process will likely include some additional methods or means to inform the public. However, when you say that they should be afforded the same time, that would, to me, suggest 6 additional forums, and I don't think that that's probably required. That's just a personal position. Any other discussion on this particular issue of boundaries? Do you have anything to say, Superintendent Tate, relative to anything that we're going to be discussing?
No, I'm sort of speechless, but Scott and I will sit. Maybe we'll have to come up with a couple options, this one or that one, because we can't do it all. And so we'll let us sit. We've taken notes, and I need to digest it all. And
okay.
I'm thinking in the back of my mind, eventually we probably at least maybe need one more forum. We've got some Alice forums that are planned. Maybe we could combine those.
Sure. Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. We'll move on to budget. Superintendent Tate.
We can do this fairly quickly, I think. We're going to do the budget amendment at the meeting next week. A short presentation. You're going to have to vote on that. But I just want to ask if you have any additional guidance. For example, on the sheet that I've given you, I have set a priority that I think you agreed to as far as early retirement insurance, but then Central North Bus, Department 5% across the board, all pay conditional busing eliminated. My question is, what if we get more than 2% and I don't have to take all those? Are they in the right order? So I just sort of work my way back up. That was one question. And then under that, is there anything you wouldn't want to take in case we get less than the 2%? You know, we now have reduced the retiree sub rate from 160 to 140, 5 forced furlough days for 63 administrators, 3 sports positions, class size for elementary. And then I also asked you, is there any feeling that if you want to take some of those off, if we get less than a 2%, that you'd want to use more additional insurance fund? I'm just interested in what you're thinking.
Any discussion? Superintendent, I'm sorry, Director Sherwood.
Thank you. Since Dr. Robinson isn't here, I'll take the promotion. Earlier in the presentation on early childhood, you made the statement, Dr. Tate, that if we wanted to make other cuts, that we could reconsider some of those cuts that you were proposing for early childhood. I know that, once again, special ed is off the table as far as discussion, but what exactly would we have to do to reestablish 0 to 2 and minimize the impact of some of these things?
I need to ask how much of that reduction is general fund, Marcia, because we can't supplement the special education.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, currently, the funding for the early childhood is not general fund. It's special education. It's Title I.
And other thing, not a bit then.
Right.
So I spoke out of turn, and we really don't have some options. The only option we have is taking more from the special education structure and providing it to early childhood.
Unless the board wants to start funding early childhood with general ed funds.
Right, and because you haven't in the past doesn't mean that could not be done. So I understand you had 25% of the 0 to 2 that was special ed, and the rest were regular ed kids. Is that what I'd heard before?
I'm not sure of the mix. I didn't take the notes.
Okay. So, but the shortfall is 300,000 for that 0 to 2.
338.
338. So, if we included class size reduction or increase, we could cover that. If we planned for the 2% and we got 3%, we could cover that. I would hope that we would look at some ways of maintaining that 0 to 2. I think that's really a big piece for us. So I don't know how we do that, but I would say I would look at it, and I think we need to look at it carefully. But that class size increase, we need to know exactly how that impacts us. Last year during budget discussions, we talked about the block, and we had a discussion about modified block, and you were going to come back with us, I believe, with some figures on what a modified block with increased skinnies would look like, how much savings that would be, because there was some general agreement that in math and other areas, the block was not necessarily beneficial for the kids. If there's some way to get the money together to keep this intact, I would again encourage that we do that.
Director Zamora.
Well, I agree that early childhood is a building block. But I would not like to see us start funding it from the general fund. I don't think that that's a good approach during these hard times, because once you do that, then it's just going to continue to stay that way. And we have enough trouble paying what we need to pay out of the general fund already. You know, these cuts are hurting everybody K through 12. I think it's reasonable that the pre-K tolerates some of those cuts too.
Director DeFau.
I agree with Director Zamora that I do not believe that we should take general fund expenditures to fund the 0 to 2 programming. Last week we talked about an additional $92,000 to $125,000 in tag that we think that we need to acquire. We've added another $338,000. Then we want to anticipate some possible general fund expenditures that may or may not have been budgeted for, which could bring us back close to $750,000. None of these expenditures get us up to $750,000 that are still on the table. I want to have a thoughtful conversation about adding to our class sizes. I don't think it's something we should take off the table, but I don't think it's something that I want to make a decision on in the next week and a half. I certainly advocated last week to retain the sports positions. That's a nominal amount of funding. It's something we've just incorporated. I think that enhances our athletic programs and provides for increased safety for our student athletes. I would go ahead and do the retiree sub rate and make that reduction as valuable as our substitute retirees are, and they are. Again, it's a cost efficiency, and we are exceedingly more generous than neighboring districts in terms of what we're paying. And you know, my last on that list would be the furlough for the administrators. We asked them to do that a couple of years ago. I do appreciate seeing it as a furlough as opposed to a permanent salary reduction. We haven't asked anybody else in the district to do that. I would not support asking our administrators to do that. And I would take everything above the line, the retiree sub rate, and as I said, even potentially the furlough days, if that's going to give us a little bit of a buffer, and God forbid if we hit 0.
Additional discussion. Director Kluhl.
Marcia, I wonder if you could come up and talk to us a little bit about the implications of using general fund money to fund the 0 to 2-year-old classrooms.
You can use general fund dollars for that, but realize that we do not get any general fund dollars for those students. We cannot count them and receive the $6,001 like we do all of our other students. So you're using funds to fund a program for which we're not getting additional revenue in for. So you would be caught up in that cycle.
It would be a precedent, but it wouldn't tie us into an ongoing situation where we had to fund it with general funds every year. Is that correct?
If you were to, well, it sounds like it would if you are going to use the general funds for staff, and the staff are there from one year to the next. Unless you're going to find another funding source, that's an ongoing cost. And so you would be tying up the general fund for that.
Could you explain again about the insurance fund? And it seems like you had suggested that we work in multiples, that you couldn't say $3 million or $2,500,000, but that it needed to be 2.
It would be really difficult for us to shut off the insurance contribution for part of a month because of the way our employees are paid and the way that we fund the self-insurance fund. Every time an employee is paid, then we take that premium and stick it in the self-insurance fund. It would be difficult to say that you take the employees that are funded once a month
and put that amount in, but the employees that are funded biweekly, that if you cut it off somewhere in between, it wouldn't be equitable. Not to say that it couldn't be done, it would be very difficult to do.
Okay, thank you, thank you. In regards to funding, I agree with the cut line at 3.238. I think that's appropriate. I really cannot believe that the legislature is going to approve anything less than 2% allowable growth. So I'm reluctant to even talk about those issues under the line, except for the fact that class size, while I don't believe that there's any strong evidence indicating that low class size means higher student improvement, higher student achievement, I think that our public is so tied into the fact that it's part of what this district stands for that it would be very difficult for us to make a decision like that this quickly without public involvement. So I think that the cut line is drawn is appropriate. If it does go to 0%, I guess what I would like to entertain, if it's possible, is to look at increasing the insurance fund reduction. Because I don't think the 0% is going to happen, but I think in lieu of talking about any of these things below the cut line, that's where I would look to pay for it from.
Director Crumwoody.
Thank you, Mr. President. As what Director Kluhl just indicated, I too strongly support the cut line, and as I understood, that was the most important thing to get our budget completed. I'm hesitant about talking about the things below the cut line because perhaps we don't know exactly what's going to happen a year from now. If we do not receive the 2% allowable growth, I too would agree that we look at the insurance fund. But I think that's, that's another discussion we need to have. But right now, I think we should stick to the 5 items above the cut line. And as all of you know, I was quite hesitant about the busing situation, but I certainly see where we need to, I would do that before any of the other things below the cut line.
Director Zamora.
Yes, I agree with Rich and Ken, and I think Nikki said the same thing. Going down to the cut line makes sense at this point. Invading the insurance somewhat further, since it's very amply endowed, is a good idea for now. And I really don't think that for the preschool we should take away from the $6,001 or whatever it is that we have for our regular students. We can't. We started that preschool by searching for funding sources. We just have to go and do it some more.
Director Sherwood.
When Governor Branstad had his education summit at the beginning of his tenure as governor, he was against early childhood and was planning no funding for early childhood. But one expert after another stepped up to the microphone and reiterated that early childhood investment is a way of cutting costs long term, that even though there may not be a direct funding mechanism for it, for every dollar we invest there, we don't have to invest later on in remediation and interventions and all those things. And so I think it's a little short-sighted to think that by protecting general fund dollars and keeping that to the people that generate them, that it's necessarily going to benefit us. It seems to me that there's overwhelming evidence that dollars spent at this level will benefit us down the road and save us lots of money. So if we can do it, I think we should do it.
Director Zamora.
I agree that there may be some of that research nationwide, but it's never been shown in our district to make a huge, it makes a difference that we've shown, but I don't think it's ever been shown to make that profound difference.
Superintendent Tate.
when I think of early childhood, I think of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and that's the research I've seen. But you're really good at research, so I'd say I was going to start looking and see if I can find something on the 0, 1, and 2, because that's important for us to know what the research says about that. At least, even if we're making the decision we can't afford it, we understand we're giving up something very important. So I'll do some looking, and maybe you can do some too.
Director Cool.
And I appreciate that. You know, listening to Director Zamora talk about the fact that Davenport started this preschool program quite early before there were state funds available, because we recognize the importance of doing this for our children. And we showed leadership in the state of Iowa at that point. And I would hate for us to lose that very important step that we took if we haven't fully researched all the funding sources available. And I'm not absolutely convinced at this point that Director Sherwood is wrong, that general funds are not to be considered at all as part of the resolution.
Any other discussion? All right, well, I guess I'll say my piece. One of them is, Marcia, the way that you characterize those dollars, and if they're general fund dollars that are not supported by the state funding, right? If we were to take those dollars and put them to the 0 to 2. Is that the way I understand it? Is that correct?
Right. You would be using the $6,001 we got for K through 12 students to fund pre-K.
And so I still need to probably put it down on paper, but you might be able to help me with it, because it seems then that I don't know if it devalues the dollar that we have for general fund. I just need to think about it a little bit, because if we're taking general fund dollars and putting them towards something over here, I think it's devalued, in fact, the $6,001 if we distribute it across all the students, if I'm thinking about that right.
And I actually, sitting here thinking, I actually have to go back and look to see if it's even allowable that we can use the funding that we receive for K-12 students on something other than a K-12 program.
Right. I agree with the importance of the programming. There's no question about that. I do believe that the Davenport District has been a leader in the past in early childhood programming through the efforts of whether it's the board or whether it's people finding grant money or whatever. And I think that those are, from my perspective, more likely funding methods. I would be very, very reluctant to spend general funds on that part of the program. In general, I agree with what it appears that the consensus is. I believe that everything above the line, so the 3238 is correct. I wouldn't have too much problem dropping one more line, reducing the retiree subrate. The furlough, I'm not very keen on. Sports, not very keen on. Class size, I agree that we could sure consider it, but I think it would be difficult at this time. And I will say that I don't have the same confidence that our legislature is going to come up with any answer by next week. And I think that's something that we've kind of taken for granted, that, oh yeah, well, we're going to get 2 or 3%. I believe just through inaction we'll end up with 0%. And that's my guess. And that will force our hand a little bit next week if that happens. So, is there any other discussion on budget? Cool. I think we're done. All right. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.